Hey everyone! A design system without governance isn't a system at all. It's just a shared folder of chaos. Today we're exploring the strategic architecture of design system governance. Stick around to find out which model actually scales with your company size. Let's get started.
The recent waves of tech layoffs have hit design system teams particularly hard. Dedicated teams are shrinking, and the ones remaining are operating under severely constrained time and budgets. Yet, as these teams shrink, the expectations on them are doing the opposite. Leadership is increasingly demanding solid, measurable impact on the bottom line to justify any continued investment in the system. This dashboard highlights the reality. You have fewer people, higher expectations, and metrics falling into the red. You can't fix this by simply designing a cleaner button component. You fix this through governance. Governance is rarely about setting design rules. It is the operational structure that dictates exactly who is allowed to make decisions about the system. Every model you choose forces a trade-off. You have to balance the speed and relevance of your individual product teams against the strict control and visual consistency of a unified brand. How you structure that decision-making power determines whether your system seamlessly scales your product or becomes an ignored bottleneck that no one has the time to use. Let's look at the first option, the decentralized model, often referred to as the Wild West. This matrix breaks down the structural differences. Looking at the decentralized column, anyone can build components. The overhead is zero, but the major risk is fragmentation. Operationally, this requires no dedicated headcount. If a product team needs a new drop-down menu, they just build it themselves and organically share it with the rest of the company. This keeps iteration light and fast and creates zero structural cost for the organization. But because there is no central oversight, isolated teams will inevitably build the exact same components differently. You end up with massive duplicate work and rapid UI fragmentation. And because everyone is prioritizing their own product deadlines over system maintenance, documentation in this model is almost always non-existent. If you need immediate velocity to get a product off the ground, it works. But as visual debt compounds, it becomes impossible to scale. Next is the centralized model, where you have a dedicated core team running the show. The matrix expands to show the core team bills everything. The overhead is high because you're paying full-time salaries, and the biggest risk is becoming a bottleneck. You're funding a specific group of designers and engineers whose full-time job is to build, document, and distribute the system to everyone else. Tools like Zero Height are often used here to host the single source of truth. Because this team is entirely focused on the system, the output is highly consistent. You get immaculate documentation and a clean, unified codebase. The danger is creating an ivory tower. The core team can easily become entirely disconnected from the real-world edge cases that product teams are dealing with every day. When the components don't meet the end user's actual needs, product teams get frustrated. They will actively deviate from the system to hit their own goals. Pristine visual consistency has no value if the people actually building the product reject the tools. Finally, we have the Federated Model, which acts like a council of experts. This final column shows a committee builds the system. It requires high coordination, and the major risk is slow decision-making. You form a cross-functional committee made up of representatives from various product teams. They spend roughly 80% of their time on their actual product work and 20% managing the design system. Massive companies like Spotify use this approach to coordinate components across multiple platforms and functions. Because the contributors are the active users, you get incredibly high organizational buy-in. Every new component is immediately stress-tested in real-world product scenarios. However, more representatives mean more opinions. This leads to design by committee, making it agonizingly slow to reach a final decision. You also run into operational friction. Product managers will fight to pull representatives away from system tasks to hit urgent delivery deadlines. Federation guarantees the system stays relevant and widely adopted, but it demands exhausting communication and strict mandates from leadership to protect the team's time. Choosing a model is not a permanent marriage. Governance is an evolving maturity curve that should change as your company grows. This flowchart maps the progression. If you have under 50 employees, you land in decentralized territory. Your focus right now is survival. You don't need a formal committee. Maintain one highly organized Figma file and prioritize speed. As you grow into the 50 to 500 employee range, the model has to shift to centralized. At this size, visual debt mounts quickly. Pivot by hiring dedicated librarians to establish a foundation and stop the UI from fracturing. When you cross the 500 employee mark, you enter hybrid and federated territory. Massive multi-product portfolios can't be understood by one small team. You combine a central infrastructure team with a federated council of product designers to ensure components remain relevant to actual users. This is exactly how organizations like Airbnb operate to maintain tight cohesion across thousands of global employees. Trying to force an enterprise model onto a startup or a startup model onto an enterprise is a fast track to failure. Match the model to your current headcount. But even with the perfect governance model precisely mapped to your company size, systems can still fail to gain traction. As design systems expert Brad Frost points out, a design system is 20% UI kit and 80% people talking to each other. When someone can't find a component, or they have a concern, or they encounter a bug, the protocol is straightforward. Talk to them. You can build the most rigid operational structure, but in a growing product organization, honest communication is the true